Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Derek Main and this is Read the World, where I review translated literature. And today's review I think is my third for this author, so you know I'm going through a phase. It is Fatale by Jean-Patrick Manchette. It's translated from the French by Donald Nicholson-Smith. And this is an NYRB Classics, as you can probably tell from the cover. So why have I been reading so much Manchette? Well, I think I said on my first one that on the 3% podcast, Tom Roberge, who's the co-owner of Riff Raff Books in Providence, Rhode Island, where since he was the initial inspiration, I've gotten all three of the titles. He talked about it, and he had written an article for the LA Review of books about Manchette's noir and his political side. So Manchette combines these three threads of me as a reader and thinker that are really important. The first is the political. I am a leftist, and so reading someone who has that kind of leftist philosophy and them putting it within fiction is obviously really satisfying. Second is the noir. So the genre that he's working in was the first genre that I fell in love with. I still will watch really crappy 1940s noirs on from the Criterion Channel or whatever, and by crappy I just mean that they don't all hold up. So I like the film noir, but I also love the written stuff. I mean, I love Ross MacDonald, I love John MacDonald. You know, I can kind of go pretty far this way into the like straight crime stuff, like the ones I just mentioned, all the way over to you know, more literary fiction, which is I think where Manchette probably lives. Certainly Chandler probably lives there. Trying to think if there's anyone. I mean, I like Piglia a lot. I think there's some, you know, I have a review of his Target in the Night, and I think it belongs in that conversation, but you know, that one I know is kind of up for debate. And crime fiction is just fascinating to me because like in literary fiction, in some ways it like snubs its nose at it. Do you know what I mean? And you'll see this too with certain regionalism types of fictions, particularly in America. And I know that's not at all my focus, but you can see it in horror fiction, science fiction, any sort of genre of fiction, you know, is going to have an interesting and sometimes tense relationship with serious fiction or literary fiction. And I'm someone that believes even literary fiction, even the most meta postmodern text you could possibly think of, is only as successful as it is enjoyable to read. So fiction is an entertainment. And so anyway, noir is one of the three threads. The other is the political. And the third, of course, is the translated literature. I mean, that's what this channel is about, and that's what most of my reading is focused on. And I have not found, you know, before Manchette, just a ton of stuff when it comes to noir to dive into in translated literature. Now, that isn't to say, there's obviously crime literature in everywhere, you know, and there's some things that could kind of be considered noir, you know, but noir in and of itself, it feels to me like it is considered an American art form coming out of and within the Depression of the 1920s, and then moving in to World War II era, that was then sort of first appreciated and loved by the French. And so that's my very base understanding of the place of noir as I knew it before I looked outside my own borders. And this channel and everything they do is about looking outside my own bubble, whatever that bubble may be. So, that's why I'm interested in Manchette. I have read now 3 to Kill, The Mad and the Bad, and Fatale. So I'm not a big ranker or anything, but I will say 3 to Kill still is my favorite of those 3. I think that politically it still has, and I've reviewed, I've reviewed all 3, so I'm not going to go deeply into them. You can check my channel for those things, but I think 3 to Kill actually is the most successful political commentary, because it deals with a liberal middle class thrown into disarray, and does it through the vehicle of one individual person. I think it's really good. Mad and the Bad is excellent. Fatale is another excellent work, and this turns so many of the conventions of noir, as you can tell just from the title, Fatale, on its head, because we are going to get a femme fatale, but nothing like how noir normally is. Our main character is going to be a woman. She's going to be a woman assassin, a woman killer. We're not ever going to get to know her in any meaningful way. And I think that part of the text is hinting at that not being important for the reader, and that not being important either for the person being killed. At a certain point, like a bullet is coming at you, or a knife is coming at you. And not a lot of time right then to go over all the reasons or the myriad of things that might have happened to come together to create this moment. But anyway, the plot. So Fatale starts off really menacing in this like hunter situation. These hunters are out there and our Fatale murders one of the hunters. And this is in the first 3 pages. Again, with all my books, I'm not going to spoil anything, but that's right there at the top. And then she is going to move into this little provincial town, sort of a very small town, kind of gossipy, and she's going to try to work her magic, which is to sort of manipulate people into turning against themselves for her own eventual financial gain. Now, what's interesting about this is it is not a seduction, and in 99 out of 100 books like this, it would be a seduction. But it's not. The manipulation is much more psychological, and it is someone who is preying very directly on people's insecurities, not just about themselves, but about their place in society, and most specifically about how other people within their little bubble perceive them. And that's one of the fears that we kind of all have as human beings, is like, how do people think of me? She is able to manipulate you that way. She's able to find those little insecurities that you have and mess with you to get you to do, through sort of a whole big puzzle piece, because she's doing this with multiple people, what she wants. And that's interesting because it's not sexual, which is what we've come to expect in the genre. Now, this leads to the political of this, because the first interesting question about Manchette is, okay, well, how is this book political? And on the back, one of the things that it posits is the Fatale, is this woman the soul of modern capitalism? I did not read it that way. And in so much as this is political, I would say that it is only a reactionary type of politics. This to me is a very straightforward crime story. And we'll get to one of the 2 readings that I'm going to do from the book does have a tinge of political. It's one of the characters that's going to say something political. So that exists in there, like politics exists within the world, leftist politics specifically within the world that's created. But the story itself is not some grander analogy, in my personal opinion. It is not some symbolism or anything that we take away to say, oh, Manchette is doing this to kind of illustrate this. Not at all. I think it's much more of a standard, really good noir. And again, the reactionary part is there are mediocre, upper middle class, and rich people that have money. And the Fatale is someone who is not mediocre, but is able to take these people's insecurities and warp them together, is not afraid to murder, to just take that money. And in that sense, like, the fact that the motives are all financial and there's no other feeling to it, it's depressing, you know, and it's certainly an indictment of like the system that we have set up and the system that we live in, but it says nothing more to me political beyond that. And certainly there are just too many wonderful noirs that at their core and at their essence are saying, you know, something akin to money is the root of all evil, which I'm just going to take as saying money is the ultimate motive in these situations. And of course it becomes the ultimate motive when money is the God that you idolize, which of course in capitalism is the way it's set up. So let me do 2 quick readings. We'll start with that political one. Page 39, this is the Baron, who's my favorite character in here and the most critical one. He's a linchpin. Very smart character who has spent his life digging up dirt about people in the town, which of course for the Fatale is going to become very, very useful. But this is a quick aside, I'll say, that the Baron goes into that does touch on the political. When I break this decanter of mine, he said, I'll replace it with one with advertising on it. He held out one of the glasses to Aimee, who reached for it with one hand as she continued toweling her hair with the other. I am very interested in promotional items and free gifts, continued the Baron, also in trash. I have no income, you see, and a man with no income is bound to take a great interest in free gifts and trash. He took a sip of brandy and clicked his tongue appreciatively. Given the present state of the world, don't you know, with the increase of constant capital as compared with variable capital, a whole stratum of the poor is bound to be unemployed and live off free gifts and trash, and occasionally off various government subsidies. Do you know what I'm saying? So, Manchette's not going to give you a novel, even a slim one like this that's probably more accurately called a novella, without throwing a little bit of that in there. And that is kind of the idea of living off of the trash of the bourgeoisie. And I just like that little part. The next thing I am going to read, the purpose of this is it's page 28, and it is the entire chapter 7, which as you can see is very brief. This is chapter 7. They're not all like that, short chapters, but not all this short. And I think this is a breathtaking example of Manchette's power with his voice in a very small, confined section. So I'm going to read this to end today's review, but I guess to sum it up, I love Fatale, and obviously my review went off a little bit on rambling and stuff, and that's because, as I've mentioned, it's very difficult to review mystery works. The fun in this is finding out what happens. What does the Fatale do? How does she manipulate them? Does she get away with it? Who lives, who dies? You know, like all of that kind of stuff. And so it doesn't, to me, lend itself to a lot of like textual analysis that's particularly interesting. And usually in Manchette's book, you can get away with that by talking about the political. But here, I personally did not find that to be the case. I thought this was just breezy, like really good, like character study. The one super interesting like twist on it was that she was not a seductress. Okay. So this is page 28, chapter 7. I'm going to end with this, and if you've never read Manchette, I think this is a great way to convince you to do it. After the eviction of Baron Jules, the cocktail party at Lorque's house soon came to an end. Back in her studio apartment, after making herself a cup of tea and taking a bath, Aimee stood in front of the bathroom sink and, looking at her reflection in the mirror, spoke to herself. Well, it's the same as ever, isn't it? It seems slow, but actually it is quite fast. Sex always comes up first, then money questions, and then, last, come the old crimes. You've seen other towns, my sweet, And you'll see others, knock on wood. She tapped her head. In the mirror, poorly illuminated by the fluorescent lighting built into the bathroom cabinet, her white reflection likewise tapped its head without smiling. "Come on, my sweet," she repeated. "The crimes come last, and you have to be patient." She drank her tea and went to bed and slept soundly. The crimes come last, and you have to be patient. Thanks so much for watching. Be good to folks.